points, the Dow almost 3,000. Now, if someone with a company trading on the stock exchange did this in normal times, it would be the kind of thing that would almost certainly spark an investigation by the Securities and Exchange Commission. They take this kind of thing seriously. But then also look at this chart of the NASDAQ yesterday, okay? You can see that just minutes before Trump announced his tariff pause, that's the yellow line, see how it starts going up almost vertically? The calls skyrocket. And then that blue mark there, that's at 118 when he actually makes the announcement. So it has a lot of folks asking, did people know Trump's pause was coming and start buying beforehand? Now, we don't know what happened here. We really don't. But some members of Congress are calling for an investigation. Senator Jeff Merkley, Democrat from Oregon, is the ranking member of the Budget Committee. He has sponsored legislation to ban stock trading by members of Congress, and he joins me now. Senator, do you think there should be an investigation into this?
Oh, 100%. Clearly, Trump was spreading the word that he was going to do something significant. Your chart shows that the stock started to rise. Well, let's just say that happened by accident. Well, if an investigation shows that, that's fine. But I think we're going to find out that people knew and started whispering it among themselves and telling relatives to buy stocks and words. Because to move a chart like that, a lot of stock purchases have to be filed.
There are no bans on members of Congress trading securities, but there is now disclosure rules. And my understanding is that there are going to be enforced disclosures in May 15th. Isn't that right? So we will get some sense of whether members of Congress were doing a lot of business on that day at the very least.
Absolutely. And there's a shorter time period for trading in individual stocks and reporting. So we'll have news. It'll be coming up, and we'll find out. Were those members of Congress just simply being smart and aware of the craziness of Trump and thinking he was going to shift directions? Or had they been in meetings at the White House and heard the whisper that what he was planning, in which case it's insider trading, and it's illegal. Even if there's no ban on members trading stocks, they still can't trade on inside information.
Right, and again, we should be clear, we don't have evidence or information that there was insider trading here. What we have is a chart suggesting there was a lot of activity before it became public, which is the kind of mystery to be solved, right? That's what we're working off of. In terms of getting that information, right, nailing down to your point, you don't want to prejudge what happened. It seems to me that there's not an investigative body that seems particularly trustworthy at this point, unless you think the SEC could be trusted. I mean, the SEC would normally do this, right? If someone does something like this is the SEC's bread and butter. Do you trust the current SEC to do an investigation?
Well, I must say my trust in any institution right now has dropped a great deal, but they are the right folks to do it. Let's challenge them to show the world that they're going to do the job that's so important. Otherwise, you're just throwing the door open to all types of insider manipulation, which would be horrific, and it wouldn't be a good look for the administration. So the administration should have a stake in a thorough investigation.
Yeah, your Democratic colleague in the House, AOC, saying that any member of Congress who purchased stocks in the last 48 hours should probably disclose now. I've been hearing some interesting chatter on the floor just to get out ahead of it. She also says it's time to ban insider trading in Congress, but I think by which she means trading in Congress. Since I have you here, Senator, let me just ask about the broader picture here of the tariffs, right? So, first of all, the possibility for market manipulation here seems essentially boundless. I mean, right now, as I'm speaking to you, Trump could take to some platform and announce something else. We're going to 500% with China, or we're going to 0, and the markets would move. But what is also clear after the sort of, boom-bust cycle is that we're still looking at the biggest tariff shock in maybe a century. Tariff levels the highest they've been since probably those infamous Smoot-Hawley tariffs in 1930. What do you think this is going to do to the American economy? What's it do to your constituents?
There's some situations in which tariffs make sense. And say you have a situation with China where they have very low environmental standards, very low wages. They're doing things that basically compromise the ability of American companies to do business in China, like telling them where they can build their factory and that they have to have a joint partnership, and then stealing the intellectual property. Okay, but you do it in a very deliberate way to encourage companies to make the decision to invest in building American factories. This looks nothing like this. In fact, Trump had two basic strategies that conflicted. He said, I'm going to make these permanent, encourage companies to move and onshore their manufacturing. Fine. In that case, you're building a modest wall proportional to the circumstances and saying it makes sense to make more things here, move some of that manufacturing here. But the moment you say, I'm doing shock and awe, and I'm doing this in order to have people negotiate, all you're saying is we don't know what the structure is going to be in the future, and there's no incentive, in fact, a big disincentive for any business to make an investment decision, a factory construction decision under those circumstances. And so now we have chaos, and that chaos is hurting the American brand. And by the way, I mean, these large tariffs, the way they were done, that wasn't Liberation Day. What were we being liberated from? Liberated from low prices, and now we're getting high prices? I mean, that was Trumpflation Day. All of those high tariffs were going to result in Americans paying so much more for the basic necessities.
Yeah, it seems to me that even if you sort of cordon off the China question and just look at this 10% across the board, I mean, that's 10% on, like, you know, I don't think we're going to source avocados here. I don't think we're going to source bananas. I don't think we're going to grow coffee particularly well in your state or in Colorado or in Maine or in North Dakota. Like, there's a bunch of stuff that we import that there's no insourcing, right? What am I missing here?
Well, no, absolutely. And it's the ag sector in my home state in Oregon. I was out in Central Oregon last weekend, and it is very on edge. Either they feel like they're being affected by the tariffs directly, or they're worried about the retaliatory tariffs. And then a bunch of the manufacturing sector in my state is saying, hey, some of the things that we put into the things we make, right, we ship from outside, and so our products are going to cost more. And does that mean we're going to be less competitive in selling things to the world? Maybe the trade deficit will increase rather than decrease under this chaotic structure.
Senator Jeff Merkley, thanks for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Still to come, how Elon Musk's Doge team says they're saving money by canceling, get this, a children's history competition. Next. Some of this we basically knew was going to happen, right? He campaigned on it. But then there are the things that just never came up in the campaign that are now happening. Some are cruel and seemingly pointless, things that make you wonder, who voted for this? For instance, who voted against National History Day? It's a nationwide history competition that more than 500,000 students work to qualify for each year. And it is, well, awesome and adorable. In fact, this is a celebration that kicked off their awards ceremony last year. You can see just how psyched all the kids are and how much they love it.
National History Day is a project-based learning experience for students in grades 6 through 12.
They get to pick their own topic within the constraints of the theme and the time period.
You can do an exhibit, you can do a performance, you can write a traditional historical paper, or you can make a website or documentary, which are the digital versions.
National History Day is a really amazing experience.
It's a great experience to learn about something that you're actually interested in.
I learned how to deep dive into a topic and learn more about how to capture someone's personality and capture their whole story.
It was just amazing to see other people excited about the same thing that I was.
I love being able to talk to people with different beliefs and from different parts of the country and other countries too.
You really get in this room and you see an entire room filled with exhibits. You realize they're not really your competitors. They're kind of the friends that you always wanted to have in high school.
I mean, come on. This is the most amazing, all-American, wholesome, non-ideological, non-political thing I can imagine, right? And if you look at any local news, seriously, over the past few weeks, you will see articles about students in places like Iowa or Texas or Mississippi or Ohio or Missouri or Pennsylvania proudly qualifying for their regional competition. And then once they clear that, they go to the big national competition, which was set to start in just 9 weeks. But last week, Donald Trump and Elon Musk killed its funding. Why? Who can say? Who the heck knows? So the executive director had to take to social media asking folks to donate so the kids can make it to the national competition in June.
This means the loss of more than $336,000 over this year and next. Now, part of that funding was to support the national contest. So now we need your help. We need to raise in the next few months about $132,000 to make History Day happen in June.
Think about these numbers for a second. In the context of the federal government and Doge and Elon Musk, the world's richest man, and the efficiencies they're bringing. $336,000 over 2 years? Or $132,000 for the competition this year? $132,000 is what they're saving, the taxpayer. And that's all that is standing between these kids and this big national award that will imprint on them for life. Donald Trump could skip one golf weekend down in Florida, and the savings could fund National History Day for decades. Elon Musk gets millions of dollars a day in federal contracts. I wonder if in the campaign, one of the candidates ran on the promise to destroy a history contest for sixth graders, if that would have affected anyone's decision. Seriously, who voted for this? During Donald Trump's first term and now in the first 60-plus days of this one. First is that, by and large, when Americans are confronted with his policies, they don't like him. He has been unpopular for most of both his presidencies. The second lesson is related to the first. Even when he's doing wildly destructive stuff, he has built in a floor of 35 to 40% that it seems he'll never fall through, no matter how bad things get. And this has profound implications for our politics. Michelle Goldberg is an opinion columnist in the New York Times who's been writing about why so many people deluded themselves about Trump. And she joins me now. I want to start on this because we've got some polling today. It's like his approval's underwater. He's at 42 or 43. There's no honeymoon anymore. The polling on tariffs is really bad. So here he is. And yet, what he's figured out is if I keep all the Republicans together, we can operate from the low 40s or 39 and 40 and do what we want, and like, who cares?
And that explains why the political gravity is so different than it would be for anyone else. I mean, there was a story in the Wall Street Journal that said sort of like he was okay with the recession, but was worried about a depression.
Yeah, we quoted exactly that. Right. In the A block, like what?
And this does not happen. I mean, you don't usually have a president purposely pursuing policies that are going to plunge the country into recession simply out of self-interest. And so this creates this kind of completely unfettered atmosphere.
Yeah, and look, I mean, there's some data here too. Like the Bulwark did one, Sarah Longwell did one of her, sort of Biden to Trump swing voter focus groups. And, people don't like the tariffs. Like, the tariffs I don't get kind of concerns me a little bit. I'm hoping it makes sense shortly. Right now, it just doesn't. Someone else said, I'm glad I just bought a new car in December because the prices are all up right now. I'm a little worried. I got an oil change, cost me $10 more. I voted for Trump as the prices to come down at the grocery store, although Trump invented the term groceries. Nothing's come down. That's why I voted for Trump, so it really hits me in the gut. And you're seeing that he's underwater the economy basically for the first time. And yet, right? This big question of, is it ever going to go lower than 40?
Right.
Which I think matters
I actually think
for the psychology of Capitol Hill and how Republicans behave.
So my guess is that it will go lower than 40, but not by much, because you still have people who are saying, well, I trust him.
Right.
I think that, whatever's happening now, it's going to be better soon. And eventually some of those are going to be able to rationalize it away, but some of them are going to be hit by the fact that it's not going to get better.
Your column, I really like this column. You said it's sort of about a thing that we've been talking about a lot, which is all these people that deluded themselves about Trump, who the scales fall from their eyes apparently in the last week.
What's been amazing to me is that these are people, I mean, the column was about the finance world. These are people who get paid so much money to understand, kind of the political system and the economic implications of it. And the fact that they were so shocked by these tariffs, I could have told them that this was going to happen, And it's like, what are you getting paid for? The fact that some of them didn't understand that Peter Navarro, kind of made up the advisor that
he cites himself.
Right, exactly. I mean, just the fact that people didn't understand that these are kooks and cranks and, and just sort of like the bottom of the barrel. And now they're suddenly realizing it, and none of this should have been surprising, but it was the extent to which these people who pride themselves on their savvy are given to this herd mentality. I mean, I guess we all knew it in some sense, but it's still really shocking.
It was one of the most striking examples I've seen. I mean, it was similar, I think, to the great financial crisis, too, right? Where you were like, wait, how did everyone get this wrong collectively in the same way?
Right.
Although that was a little different. But what I will say here, the question I think is, I do think something broke this week among certain elites, particularly. I think there was a sort of idea of like, we're going to just have willful amnesia about January 6th. We're going to have willful amnesia about COVID and injecting bleach. We're going to just, like, Men in Black it, like, whoop, didn't happen. We're going to give this guy a shot because we think he can help us. And I do think something broke among that crowd.
I think they convinced themselves in this bizarre way that he has he's some sort of savant, right? That even though he says these things that are preposterous, the very fact that he's been so politically successful implies some sort of crazy wisdom, as opposed to just craziness and demagoguery.
Yes.
And, you know, hopefully now that's been revealed to them, that there is really nothing there but the most kind of like feral whims.
And it also seems to me that you have a lot of, it's interesting to watch how Democrats have been messaging this, including Senator Merkley. Like, there is a lot, it doesn't really bother me, I don't care one way or the other, but there's a lot of like, well, tariffs can be right in some places and this, it doesn't feel like they're going in for the kill.
It's ridiculous.
In the way that you would expect when you've got a guy whose closest advisors, it appears, are telling the Wall Street Journal that he knows he's driving the economy into recession.
Right. I mean, I understand that maybe they feel like they're on the back foot in terms of the industrial working class, but this is not the time for the debate. It is that this is like a crazy, unfit person driving off a cliff, and we're all stuck in the car with him.
Yes, and I think one of the things that has happened is they have found in their polling that argument, which is the simplest and most straightforward, a lot of people have tuned that out. Like, they just stopped believing that's the case because he's been elected twice. He's been around long enough.
Well, and that's why he was elected twice.
Right.
But it doesn't. But I also think that you're not going to need to convince them for long, right? Pretty soon, I think that will be it's not going to be clear to everyone, but it will be clear to more and more people as time goes on.
Yeah, one of the things I've been thinking about is that this is a guy who's sort of been rewarded his entire life for using his will, which is formidable, to overcome reality. And the two places it didn't work was in COVID and in the election of 2020. And now he's up against like global financial markets, and he's meeting the same sort of hard wall. Michelle Goldberg, it's always great.
Thank you so much.
That is all in on this Thursday night. The Rachel Maddow Show starts right now. Good evening, Rachel.
Good evening, Chris. I'm continuing to draft off of you. Do you remember when you had Eric Holder a little while ago?
I saw the promo today. I was like laughing about the thought of the phone call that happened.
How did you get Eric Holder? I've been trying to get him. Well, apparently that's the way I need to appeal, because I do have him tonight. Thank you, my friend. I know it's because of you.
I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Me too. All right. Thanks for joining us this hour. Really happy to have you here. We do have Obama administration Attorney General Eric Holder here tonight. I have been trying to get him to do an interview here on the show for a gazillion years, but he is here tonight. And boy, what a night for it. I'm really, really, really looking forward to that conversation. I hope you are as well. That is coming up in just a moment. This was Springfield, Massachusetts today.
Protesters were outside of the federal building on Main Street in Springfield, chanting, "We say fight back," holding signs that read, "Hands off our Social Security." The group, made up of concerned citizens and advocacy organizations, believe Social Security that supports 73 million Americans is in danger.
The changes that this government is trying to impose have a great deal of pain for a lot of people.
Their concerns are centered around the DOGE cuts to Social Security and the modernization of online systems, as well as the threat of a cutoff of telephone services that was scheduled to take effect April 14, but has since been pushed back.
The good news is that pushback has happened a little bit and worked a little bit. We all have to do more. No time to stop.
The Social Security Administration plans to cut over 7,000 employees and close regional offices, which people worry could create an even bigger problem. Seniors and disabled residents tell 22 News this could break the system and interrupt benefit payments.
This is really dire. This is just going to throw a lot of old people and people with disabilities on the street. This is unconscionable. I can't imagine. What are they thinking?
That was Springfield, Massachusetts just today. This was Washington, D.C. today, as the Republicans did today manage to pass their budget plan through the House. They tried last night, couldn't do it, pulled it at the last minute, but then they got it through today. It will trade huge tax cuts benefiting the richest people in the country for huge Medicaid cuts, taking health care benefits away from more than 70 million regular Americans. People turned out today in Washington to protest that. This was Bloomington, Indiana today, where students and Bloomington community members turned up and protested after the Trump administration started stripping visas from kids at that school, kids studying at Indiana University, forcing them to abandon their studies and flee the country under threat of being arrested and imprisoned. We saw the same at UC San Diego. Protests there today in response to Trump revoking student visas from students at UCSD as well. We saw the same in Minnesota, people coming out and protesting against students at the University of Minnesota at Mankato, where at least one student has already been seized, been grabbed by Trump's agents, and more University of Minnesota students are now under the same threat.
Say it once, say it twice. Say it once, say it twice. We will not put up with ICE. We will not put up with ICE.
After two separate incidents on MSU Mankato's campus over the past couple weeks, Mavericks for Change, alongside other student groups, demonstrated on campus Wednesday. The first incident saw a still unidentified student detained by ICE, and another saw 5 international students have their visas revoked unexpectedly.
University of Minnesota at Mankato. This was Connecticut yesterday. New Haven, Connecticut. There's a small airport there called Tweed Airport, and protests sprung up at the airport. Now, that's because there's an airline that operates out of New Haven Airport, a small carrier called Avelo Airlines, A-V-E-L-O. You see it there painted on the side of the plane. Avelo Airlines has signed a contract with the Trump administration, with ICE, to fly people out of the country on Trump's deportation flights. And they are doing that. They've announced that they've signed that contract with ICE to do Trump's deportation flights while they're still trying to market themselves to the public as a nice airline you might want to fly for your own vacation or business travel or whatever. You can see why that might not turn out to be a feasible combination.
Protesters are upset that Avelo had signed a long-term charter agreement to fly for the Department of Homeland Security. Now, the plan is to fly immigrants rounded up by the Trump administration out of the country. Activists are asking the public to sign a pledge that they're not going to fly Avelo until Avelo stops those flights.
Today, also in New York City, we saw a big protest at City Hall over disgraced Mayor Eric Adams' decision to put Trump's immigration agents at New York's Rikers Island. Immigrants are New York. You see the signs there. Eric Adams wants due process for himself and his friends, but torture at Rikers for regular New Yorkers. On that point of due process, we've had a flurry of news today. And I got to tell you, each piece of this news in a normal administration would earn like a week or a month's worth of sort of jaw-dropping headlines and scandal. But when you're in the middle of an attempted authoritarian revolution, for us, these things just come one after the other, and today has been a little bit nuts. Let's start at the United States Supreme Court. Even though there has been a ruling here, I would consider this still a developing story, and I'll explain why. Tonight, the Supreme Court has intervened in the case of a Maryland father who the Trump administration admits it accidentally, sent him to a foreign prison in El Salvador, even though they had no right to do it. In court, the Trump administration has admitted he was not supposed to be sent to that foreign prison. While they have also maintained in court that, oh, well, that's too bad. He's now effectively stuck in that prison, maybe forever, because the U.S. has no power to get him back, even though they sent him there mistakenly. Now, a federal judge in Maryland ordered several days ago that that could not stand for obvious reasons, that Trump had to go and get him. The Trump administration had to go and get him and bring him back. The judge, you might remember, gave the Trump administration a deadline of Monday night this past Monday night at midnight was when they had to have that guy back in the United States. After that judge's order, the Trump administration succeeded in getting the Supreme Court to hit pause on that order until they themselves could weigh in. Well, in this ruling tonight, the Supreme Court has weighed in. And they have ordered that this man from Maryland, Kilmar Abrego Garcia, they have ordered that he has to be returned to the United States, maybe? I say maybe, and I say this is still a developing story. I'm just gonna show you and tell you exactly what the Supreme Court said. And you tell me if you can figure it out. This is an unsigned order that was issued on behalf of a unanimous Supreme Court. And it first says that Monday night deadline, that deadline that the Maryland judge had set for earlier this week, saying that guy had to be brought back by 11:59 p.m. on Monday night, the Supreme Court first says that obviously that deadline is no longer binding because that deadline has passed. So that part of the judge's order cannot be seen as still being in effect. Okay, I get that. But then they say, aside from that deadline, quote, the rest of the district court's order remains in effect. Well, the rest of the judge's order was to bring the guy back, right? I mean, at this point in the ruling, it seems like the Supreme Court is saying Kilmar Abrego Garcia needs to be brought back to this country from El Salvador, right? I mean, that was the judge's order. By 11:59 p.m. on Monday, bring the guy back. They're saying, we're not going to do the 11:59 p.m. on Monday part, but yeah, the rest of the order still stands. It sounds like the Supreme Court is ordering that they need to bring the guy back. But then, even in this very, very short order, the Supreme Court makes a very squishy case of it. I mean, look for yourself. This is the exact language. I mean, the rest of the district court's order remains in effect, but requires clarification on remand. When they say remand, they mean when we sent it back to that lower court. The ruling says the lower court judge's order properly requires the Trump administration to, quote, facilitate Mr. Abrego Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador and to ensure that his case is handled as it would have been had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador. But the intended scope of the term effectuate in the district court's order is unclear, and it may exceed the district court's authority. Huh? The district court should clarify its directive with due regard for the deference owed to the executive branch in the conduct of foreign affairs. For its part, the government should be prepared to share what it can concerning the steps it has taken and the prospect of further steps. The administration should be prepared to share what they can? What is this, group therapy? Do you feel you can share? Do you want the talking pillow? Are we going to have a tissue issue? Do you want me to? The government should be prepared to share what it can. It would appear that the United States Supreme Court is ordering that the Trump administration cannot randomly take literally anyone off the street and send them to a foreign hellhole prison, potentially for the rest of their life, without giving that person a chance to argue against it in court. But the Supreme Court also appears to be quite afraid to just say so. And so they've given us this squish opinion that is being variously interpreted by various news organizations, depend on which lawyers are advising them on how to phrase this thing. Because they can't just come out and say it. Now, there is a signed statement accompanying this unsigned ruling, specifically from Justice Sonia Sotomayor. And in her very plain language, she appears to be trying to clarify that the court is saying, yeah, this kid does have to come back. This guy does have to be brought back. This is just her statement that accompanies the ruling. It's not the ruling itself, but she appears to be trying to clarify. Justice Sotomayor says, in part, in her statement accompanying the ruling, quote, I agree with the court's order that the proper remedy is to provide Mr. Abrego Garcia with all the process to which he would have been entitled had he not been unlawfully removed to El Salvador. All the process to which he would have been entitled had they not just shipped him off. She says, quote, that means the government must comply with its obligation to provide Mr. Abrego Garcia with due process of law, including notice, meaning advance notice, and an opportunity to be heard in any future proceedings. An opportunity to be heard in future proceedings, I guess, means they need to bring this guy back from El Salvador so they can produce him to the federal court in Maryland for those future proceedings. Yes, I guess, maybe. So they do have to bring him back? For their part, the lawyers for Mr. Abrego Garcia are saying this ruling settles it. They released a statement in response to the Supreme Court's action tonight saying, quote, "The rule of law won today, time to bring him home." And it may be, but we will have to see what happens now. With the original judge in Maryland to whom this case is being remanded, we'll have to see if Trump still tries to keep this guy locked up indefinitely, again, potentially permanently in another country, even though Trump has had to admit that the administration never even meant to send him to that other country, nor were they even able to contend that they had any legal justification for doing it. I mean, this is like Kafka mixed with Bozo the Clown. I mean, when this case was in court in Maryland this past Friday, the lawyer for the Trump administration who was trying to defend what the administration was doing basically had to turn himself inside out in the courtroom and try to make himself disappear in order to try to make this make sense. Because it became very clear in that courtroom there was no way for that lawyer to be both, rational and truthful to the court, which he was obliged to be, but also to defend what the Trump administration is doing. I'll just give you one little piece of it. You'll see what I mean. This is from the transcript of that hearing. The judge. Well, on what basis is he held in the El Salvadoran prison? What basis is he held? Why is he there, of all places? Trump administration lawyer. This is where I'm going to respond in a frustrating way, Your Honor. I don't know. The judge. You don't know? Trump administration lawyer. I don't know. That information has not been given to me. I don't know. The judge. Okay, well then, again, for everyone here, that means there's no evidence that there's a basis to hold him in that country. So we got that straight. But let me ask you this, she says. So there's not some other legal authority to hold him? Trump administration lawyer, I don't know. The judge. Can we talk about then, just very practically, why can't the United States get Mr. Abrego Garcia back? Trump administration lawyer. Your Honor, I will say, for the court's awareness, that when this case landed on my desk, the first thing I did was ask my clients that very question. I have not received, to date, an answer that I find satisfactory. The judge. Okay, well, I do appreciate your candor. So the Trump administration has put its own lawyer between a rock and a hard place here, right? This lawyer is trying his best to answer the judge's questions truthfully, while also following the directions of his client, Donald Trump. An impossibility. That court proceeding was on Friday. By Saturday, that lawyer was gone, put on indefinite administrative leave from the Justice Department, as was his supervisor. Attorney General Pam Bondi explained the situation with this statement. She said, quote, "At my direction, every Department of Justice attorney is required to zealously advocate on behalf of the United States. Any attorney who fails to abide by this direction will face consequences." And that is this case. That's the Maryland case of this Maryland father who they accidentally sent to El Salvador. That's this one case that has now gone up to the Supreme Court tonight and been put on puree by a unanimous but apparently terrified Supreme Court, which is desperately trying to spin something out of this that doesn't sound like it's saying no to Donald Trump. But this pattern, this kind of thing in court has been happening again and again and again, and it's starting to have a really interesting consequence. For weeks now, we have seen this pattern emerging. You've got lawyers representing the Trump administration who are being forced effectively to present arguments that either aren't truthful or don't make sense in court. And when they try to pull that off in open court, they face questioning from judges. And the judges immediately suss out that what the lawyers are trying to defend is indefensible or obviously untrue. And so again and again and again, you're seeing Trump administration lawyers basically being thumbtacked to the back wall of the courtroom by one judge after another. And it has produced these incredible headlines. Headline, is that really how you think this all works? Outraged judge repeatedly mocks DOJ lawyers, tears into them for being unprepared. Headline, judge in Alien Enemies Act case chides DOJ lawyer over refusal to answer key questions. Headline, judge snaps at Trump administration lawyers for gaslighting. And again, this is just an untenable situation these lawyers are being put in. right? You have to be truthful to a judge. You have to be truthful to the court as a lawyer who's standing there in front of the judge. But being truthful in this administration is seen as a betrayal of Donald Trump. So what are these lawyers supposed to do, right? You literally cannot lie to a judge and stay a lawyer. But telling the truth to a judge in so many of these cases, not only is it not going to win you the case, it helps prove the point that the administration is losing all of these cases because they keep doing things that are really blatantly illegal, right? And if you lose the case in court, or you lose that day's proceeding in court because you told the judge the truth, well, that's cause for firing in Donald Trump's Justice Department. So what are you supposed to do? I mean, honestly, the answer is obvious, right? Ethically, you can see, whether or not you're a lawyer, right? You can see what you would do and what you should do if you were a lawyer in this case. You just do the right thing, right? You zealously represent your client, yes, but you always tell the truth. Those are my choices. What else can I do? And so they're all quitting. We are now seeing this untenable situation reach its natural mathematical conclusion in a pretty dramatic way. The Washington Post is now reporting that at least half of the frontline lawyers in the Solicitor General's office are either preparing to leave or have announced their departures already. What's the Solicitor General's office? That's the office that specifically argues cases for the administration in front of the Supreme Court. A majority of their lawyers have now quit or are quitting. Quote, many of the lawyers leaving the office are uncomfortable or turned off by directives from Justice Department leaders. Again, the reporting here is that at least half of the lawyers whose job it is to defend Donald Trump at the Supreme Court, a majority of the office that has that responsibility has now quit or is about to quit. That seems like a bad sign, right? Seems like a bad sign in terms of what this administration is up to. I mentioned that we have Eric Holder, former Attorney General, here tonight. We're going to talk to him about this. And there's one other thing going on here that is really, it's the reason we called him. It's the thing I really feel like we all need to hear from him about. And it's this new executive order that Trump has just signed. We don't pay attention to all of them because effectively his executive orders aren't law, right? His executive orders are basically just like long tweets with calligraphy that he puts on a big menu board and signs after he's told what's in them. Like, his executive orders don't have force of law, but they are orders from the president. And he has just signed an executive order that orders the U.S. Justice Department to investigate two people, to investigate two officials from his first presidential term, people who Trump has decided are his enemies. Chris Krebs from CISA, the Department of Homeland Security's cybersecurity agency, and Miles Taylor, who worked in the White House and wrote a book about Trump's dangerous authoritarian inclinations. Now, as if he is trying a little too hard to prove Miles Taylor's point about that, Trump has just signed this executive order that's not just him, yelling, lock him up into a microphone at a rally. It's him as president actually ordering his Justice Department to open investigations into these individual people at his direction. Former Congresswoman Liz Cheney's response was on point and succinct. She said, quote, in a special mix of incompetence and evil, Trump has combined his disastrous implementation of 1930s tariff policies with Stalin-esque targeting of political adversaries. She says, speaking the truth is only a crime in countries ruled by tyrants. Legendary conservative judge Michael Luttig responded today by calling the demand, quote, the president's most constitutionally corrupt executive order to date. He says that this is occurring in the United States of America is shameful. It is a travesty of justice that Mr. Krebs and Mr. Taylor and the nation's law firms and legal profession are being forced to defend themselves against the President of the United States and his palpably unconstitutional conduct. The President obviously thinks the Supreme Court will ultimately side with him. It is just as obvious that it will not. Judge Ludig says, quote, but the innocent American citizens targeted with these unconstitutional executive orders should not have to wait one day longer for vindication of their constitutional rights. Their professional lives and livelihoods will be destroyed before such time as the Supreme Court rules. That is exactly what the president is counting on. That's why he continues to issue executive orders in defiance of the rulings of the federal courts. Judge Ludig says, quote, both Mr. Krebs and Mr. Taylor should immediately bring lawsuits in the federal district court in Washington, D.C. against the president, the attorney general, and the director of the FBI for vindictive/malicious prosecution. They should be prepared to litigate all the way to the Supreme Court before the two men are actually prosecuted. Judge Ludig says, quote, in my view, the lower federal courts should summarily strike down this executive order and quash the president's ordered investigation of these two honorable American citizens. The Supreme Court of the United States thereafter should summarily affirm. He concludes with this. We all know what's going on here at this point. The president is not going to stop until he is stopped once and for all by the federal courts. So this is one of the red lines, right? The president ordering the Justice Department to target individuals that he doesn't like. That is one of the red lines we have been expecting him to cross, and here it is. This is like tyranny 101. This is intro to tyranny. This is no longer an advanced class where you have to like read the subtleties. This is very elementary stuff. Once the tyrant starts directing his prosecutors to open investigations into his named enemies because he named them as enemies, you're there. So what's going to be the response? If we've still got the antibodies to defend ourselves as a democracy, if our civil society is still working, if our legal profession is still on the job, what we ought to see here in response to this, in response to what will be not just these two guys being targeted, it'll be a dozen, it'll be 100, it'll be 1,000 of these if Trump likes how this one goes and he isn't stopped from doing it. What we ought to see here, if our democracy is still kicking, what we ought to see here is a battalion of the highest end lawyers in the country flooding in to provide Chris Krebs and Miles Taylor with free legal representation, and with the kind of no-holds-barred, super aggressive legal fight that Judge Ludig is describing today. Are we going to see it? As the biggest, poshest, most powerful law firms in the country, even tonight, continue to suck up to Trump and promise to do him favors in exchange for him no longer criticizing them or threatening them? Do we still have the juice as a country? Are we still kicking? Legal profession, you still there? Are all the pretty words America's most prominent lawyers are famous for about the rule of law and no fear or favor, are all those just pretty words? Or are we going to see them show up? Because time's up. It is now. Everything you were supposedly preparing for, it's here. Eric Holder joins us next.
Work.
Months ago, Donald Trump's hand-picked U.S. attorney in Washington, D.C., posted a message on social media addressed to a law firm called Covington and Burling. Bizarrely, the message said, "Save your receipts. We'll be in touch soon." Not long after, President Trump signed an executive order targeting that law firm, calling for their federal contracts to be ended, even though Covington and Burling doesn't appear to have any federal contracts. It was all because Covington and Burling had represented Jack Smith, the special counsel who investigated and prosecuted Trump before he returned to office, and thereby made all his federal charges go away. It's also the firm, incidentally, where former Attorney General Eric Holder is senior counsel. But that first shot at Covington and Burling would be the first of just many law firms Trump would go on to target in recent weeks. It's continued even through tonight as he's announcing more deals with more law firms who he says have come to him essentially as seeking appeasement from him. Happens amid what feels like a multi-front assault on what's commonly thought of as the rule of law, but we're getting real familiar with all the specifics of it as Trump takes aim at them one after another after another. Joining us now for the interview tonight is former Attorney General of the United States, Eric Holder. Mr. Attorney General, it's really nice to see you. Thank you very much for being here.
Glad to be here with you, Rachel.
So I have a million things I want to talk to you about, as you might expect. I first want to get your reaction tonight to what we've seen from the Supreme Court. There's this young man from Maryland, a father who was arrested by the Trump administration. They sent him to a prison in El Salvador. They say it was in error, but also they have no intention of getting him back. The Supreme Court appears to have ruled tonight that they must bring him back, but also the ruling is sort of hard to parse. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it yet or what your reaction is to it, but I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I've not had a chance to read thoroughly the opinion, but I think you can boil it down, and people, as lawyers do, we can start to parse words here and there. But I think what the court is essentially saying is that, look, you admit that you made a mistake. You took this guy without due process, placed him in a detention facility in El Salvador, and are now saying that you can't get him back. That is unacceptable. That this man is entitled to due process. A determination has to be made as to whether or not he can be deported from the United States, and through due process, that is going through the court system, he has to have the ability to put forth any arguments that he has, and then a judge is going to have to make a determination. I think that is the clear input. That's the clear, that's the obvious thing that the Supreme Court is saying. The question is going to be now, how will the Trump administration react to that? The court talks about facilitating. How are they going to, interpret that? Are they going to do it over the course of the next couple of days, the next month? And I wouldn't be surprised if we end up yet with another proceeding before the district court saying Supreme Court said the client had to be brought back. He's not here. We demand to have him brought back as soon as is possible.
I want to ask you to reflect a little bit on what we're seeing in terms of the treatment of immigrants right now. I feel like, I'm not a lawyer. I'm a person who pays attention to the news and reports the news as best I can. But I feel like my sort of moral tuning fork, I guess it is resonating so hard I can hardly stand it in terms of the way that immigrants are being treated in one policy decision after another that all seem to rely on this basic sense that when it comes to the treatment of immigrants, there's really no law that constrains what the administration can do. And so you're seeing student visas revoked, which they have the right to do, but you're seeing students not notified of that. And the first time they find out about it is when they're snatched off the street, thrown into an unmarked car, and put into a prison when they had no idea they'd done anything wrong. Tonight, we're seeing, they're having their Social Security numbers revoked, which instantly makes them not only liable to arrest and deportation, but also makes it impossible for them to continue to live in this country in any legal sense. All of this just feels like they believe no law constrains them when it comes to people who aren't U.S. citizens. And there's more that I could add to that universe. But what is your reflection on that in terms of us as a country and how the administration is treating these people among us?
Let's cut right through this. This is disgusting. It's shameful. It's inconsistent with the rule of law, and it's also inconsistent with who we say we are as a nation. And every American citizen, every inhabitant of this country should be offended by what this administration is doing. But beyond that, every citizen in this country ought to be afraid, because the reality is, if they are successful in doing this to immigrants, and now they're doing things against American citizens, as you talked about before, who criticized the president, it won't be too long. And the president himself has said he had no objections to taking convicted criminals and putting them in the same jail in El Salvador. There's a treadmill that we're potentially getting on here that could result in the erosion of rights for American citizens. Now, I'm not saying that's the only reason that we should be concerned about this. People who are in this country deserve the ability to go before courts and have courts make determinations about whether they can stay, whether they should leave, how they should be treated. And this administration wants to take upon itself, to the derogation of the ability of the courts and certainly of the legislative branch, the ability to decide everything. This is how you get authoritarianism. This is remarkably similar to kind of what happened in Europe in the 30s. It's consistent with what we saw happen in Hungary and in Turkey in later days over the course of the last 10, 15, 20 years. And that's not a path that this country wants to go down. And I want people to understand this. If you don't stand up and fight now, if you don't take a position now, it's going to be too late. We can't say we can wait just a little longer. No. No, the time is now to stand up and do all that we can to fight this administration. Now.
Do you believe that the lawyers in this country, particularly the private sector lawyers of big firms, are doing enough to stand up for the people who are at the sharp end of the stick with this administration? And I do mean the people who have been treated the worst. I mean immigrants, and I mean the trans community, and I mean other people who have just had rights stripped from them even more aggressively than the rest of the country is experiencing. I feel like we're not seeing a rush to the barricades on behalf of the legal community in the way that we did in the first Trump administration, and I think that's because the legal community, big law in particular, is afraid of Trump and is trying to appease him rather than confront him. I wonder if you share that view.
Yeah, some are doing, I think, the right thing. Some are being timid. Some are showing themselves to be cowards. Some are making business determinations when they ought to be making legal decisions or putting into their decision-making a sense of moral obligation. And I've been disappointed by some in the legal profession about the ways in which they have interacted with this administration. You can't make deals with these folks. This is an attack on the rule of law. They want to go after people who are their critics. They want to go after people who would defend those people, that is, the lawyers. They want to have a Justice Department that fires lawyers who tell the truth to judges. They want to then go after the judges themselves. This is all part of a piece. It's all about the erosion of the rule of law so that Donald Trump will have the ability to have authoritarian powers in this nation. This is the person who the founders tried to put a system in place to prevent from coming to power. And unless we as lawyers stand up, joined by the judiciary, and somehow get Congress to find out that it has power within our system of government, we will lose that which defines this nation, that which makes this nation exceptional. That is really what is at stake. But you have to get granular. And every lawyer, I think, has to ask him or herself, every law firm has to ask itself, where do we stand? You know, it was an easy thing after George Floyd was murdered, when we had a videotape of a black man with a cop with his knee on that man's throat as he was pleading for his life. It was an easy thing at that point, as horrible as that was, an easy thing to come and say that we are against that, we are for the rule of law, people like that cop need to be held accountable. Now it's not so easy. Now it's difficult. And as Tom Paine said, you know, this is not the day of the Sunshine Patriot. Oh, this is the day of the Sunshine Patriot. We have to make sure that when it gets tough, we're prepared to do the difficult things. Some, unfortunately, I think too many, have made the determination that they're not willing to make the necessary sacrifices for the very system that has sustained them, not only economically, but given them privileges that we as lawyers have. It is our responsibility to stand up for the rule of law.
I hear the urgency in your voice there. I also believe that those who have made the weak decision thus far should know that it isn't a decision forever, and they can turn around. They can recognize that they were wrong and turn that around. Mr. Attorney General, if you wouldn't mind holding on for one more moment, I have a lot more to ask you. Can you stick with us?
Sure.
All right, we'll be right back with more with former Attorney General Eric Holder. Stay with us. Joining us once again is former U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder. Mr. Attorney General, thank you so much for being here again. Last night, President Trump ordered the Justice Department, in a bizarre executive order, he ordered DOJ to investigate two named people who served in his administration during his first term in office. Each of them had criticized or contradicted him publicly. This is one of the anti-democratic bright red lines that I've been waiting for the Trump administration to cross. The president ordering his prosecutors to go after named people who displease him. Like, we're there. What do you think the response should be now that this has happened?
Well, in some ways, this is the most disturbing of the executive orders that he has signed. Everybody needs to understand executive orders do not have the power of law, and yet they can move parts of the executive branch. I would hope that lawyers, I assume that they have lawyers, will be as creative and as aggressive as they possibly can to forestall any investigation that might be taken. That might be a difficult thing to do. I'll have to look actually at what the terms are of the executive order. It may state a reason. I have not seen it. It may state a specific reason. He's not been shy in putting into his executive orders exactly why he is ordering these things. And if he's ordering that it be done because they were, in essence, critics of the policies that he had in place in his first administration, that might serve as a basis for trying to forestall any action by the Justice Department pursuant to the orders of the president. But this is a time, I think, to be aggressive in pushing back as much as is possible against these really absurd and shameful executive orders.
And thinking about putting together that kind of aggressive legal defense, that gets us right to the question of what's been happening with the president's efforts to, I think, shockingly successful efforts to intimidate law firms. And we've talked about this a little bit. I mentioned that your firm, Covington & Burling, was the first firm to be targeted by Trump. I know that your firm has signed a brief in support of another firm that is targeted by the president and that's fighting the executive order in court. But, you know, just tonight, the Wall Street Journal is reporting that 4 more big firms are nearing deals with Trump where they're going to do tens of millions of dollars worth of pro bono work for causes that he chooses, all in an effort to sort of appease him and keep him from criticizing them or targeting them. You said that you've been disappointed in the way the law firms have responded here. What do you think the right response would be from law firms, from big law partners, when these threats started coming down the pike? What should they do now, even now that so many of them have already signed these deals?
Well, I think, first off, the profession should have stuck together and rejected all of the attempts to go after them in the way that he has done, reject all of these executive orders and sue, as some have. If we had stuck together, if we had all stuck together, these facially invalid, clearly unconstitutional orders would have had no impact on the profession and would have allowed the profession to proceed in the way that I expect that it would. It's unfortunate that some have decided to cut deals with the administration, some even before they were the targets of executive orders. And I think that, you know, some pledged $40 million, $100 million, whatever it is, that he can help determine how the money is to be used for so-called pro bono activities. And I saw today he was talking about getting these law firms to help him negotiate trade deals or work on this whole tariff controversy. I'm not sure that they anticipated that, but that's what happens when you make deals with people like the president. You can't really tell exactly how you're going to be used. And so I would hope that that firms would consider their obligations, stand fast, understand that if you sue, you're likely to win, and that you will not suffer any consequence as a result of your opposition. Now, it also means that other firms should not be trying to poach clients of firms that are the recipients of these executive orders, should not be trying to poach lawyers of the firms that receive these executive orders. The profession, these firms, need to stand together. But if we do, I think we ultimately win. And for those who make these deals, what are you going to say 5 years from now, when this is over? And when you start to talk about all the great culture that you have, the commitment that you have to the rule of law, how you're willing to take chances to take on unpopular clients, how are you going to say that with a straight face? How are you going to recruit young lawyers to come join you in what you say is the noble quest of the legal profession? These are all the kinds of things that ought to go into the calculus that these firms make when they're trying to determine how they're going to react to executive orders that are either put against them or threatened to be put against them.
Yeah, what the legal profession, as a non-lawyer looking from the outside, what the legal profession has needed here, plainly, is leadership. I think with those words, you're providing some important leadership here tonight. Former Attorney General Eric Holder, it's an honor to have you here tonight, sir. Come back anytime. I'd love to have you.
Okay, thank you.
A bunch of outdoorsy companies lined up to endorse the guy, including the crunchy retailer REI. Well, yesterday, REI decided, are they sorry about that? They've decided to pack it out. Never mind. Doug Burgum, take a hike.
Earlier this year, REI signed an outdoor industry letter supporting Doug Burgum as Secretary of the Interior. Let me be clear. Signing that letter was a mistake. I'm here today to apologize to our members on behalf of REI, to retract our endorsement of Doug Burgum, and to take full accountability for how we move forward.
A fairly rugged unendorsement for Secretary Doug Burgum, or Secretary Warm Cookies, as we call him now, after the Atlantic magazine reported that Doug Burgum apparently has assigned staff in his agency to make him warm, freshly baked cookies in his office. The news of REI so publicly taking back their endorsement of Interior Secretary Warm Cookies comes amid a bizarre personnel headache for one of the agency's Secretary Cookies oversees, the Bureau of Land Management. This week, the Senate was supposed to consider the nomination of Trump's pick to run the Bureau of Land Management. The Senate Energy Committee was supposed to consider her nomination today, but a couple days ago, an investigative group revealed that she had once criticized Trump over the January 6th attack. She said she was disgusted by the violence and that Trump had spread the misinformation that incited it, which is true. Nevertheless, today, instead of hearing her nomination, Republican Senator Mike Lee opened her hearing with this announcement for the ages. Watch this.
I've been informed this morning that Ms. Kathleen Sagama has withdrawn her consideration to be the director of the Bureau of Land Management at the Department of the Interior.
We are here today to consider the nomination of Kathleen Sagama to run the Bureau of Land Management. What's that? What's that? I have been informed that not happening. Any warm cookies? Anybody? Would anybody like some warm cookies? It's been an awkward week for Interior Secretary Doug Burgum. Sometimes that is the way the cookie crumbles. I'm already sorry that I said that. See you again tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Eastern. Now it is time for The Last Word with the great Lawrence O'Donnell. Good evening, Lawrence.
Good evening, Rachel. You know what I haven't had in 2025?
What?
I have not had a single warm cookie. And I blame the team here at MSNBC for misplacing my warm cookie order.
Yeah, I don't think we're in that. I don't think we're in that regime anymore. No. If we were ever in that at MSNBC,
who can we turn, Rachel? Our offices are right beside each other upstairs. Who can we turn to demand the warm cookies, like a Trump cabinet member?
Have you even tried the coffee in our little kitchen?
I have in desperate moments. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a we're in austerity situation, Lawrence. But I think it's just to like keep us tough. You know what I mean? Like I don't think it's a money thing or whatever. I think it's not working for me.
It doesn't work for me. That's not how. It's not how you get the best out of me.
I'll bring you cookies. Okay. I'll bring you cookies. Fine.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you. I await my cookies. Thanks. Well, at 6:42 p.m. the breaking news in this country became the fact that the United States Supreme Court ruled that Donald Trump's deportation of Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia was and is illegal. In the second sentence of a Supreme Court ruling on the case, Chief Justice John Roberts wrote, Abrego Garcia was subject to a withholding order forbidding his removal to El Salvador, and that the removal to El Salvador was therefore illegal. The court sent the case back to the federal district court judge in Maryland, where the case began, saying that that judge's order, quote, properly requires the government to facilitate Abrego Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador and to ensure that his case is handled as it would have been had he not been improperly sent to El Salvador. The intended scope of the term effectuate in the district court's order is, however, unclear and may exceed the district court's authority. The district court should clarify its directive with due regard for the deference owed to the executive branch in the conduct of foreign affairs. For its part, the government should be prepared to share what it can concerning the steps it has taken and the prospect of further steps.
The European Union's just announced it's pausing retaliatory tariffs on the U.S. one day after Trump abruptly lowered his so-called reciprocal tariffs on most countries for 90 days, just hours after they took effect Wednesday. Most U.S. trading partners will now see a blanket 10% tariff in addition to the previously imposed 25% tariffs on cars, steel, and aluminum. But China was not spared in Trump's sudden U-turn. Beijing now faces a hiked-up total tariff of 125% in retaliation for Beijing enacting an 84% levy on U.S. goods Wednesday. Markets rallied following the announcement after days in free fall. Trump told reporters he made the decision to halt the tariffs yesterday morning because people were, quote, getting a little bit yippy. But Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent claimed the move was part of Trump's larger plan to create maximum negotiating leverage.
It took great courage for him to stay the course until this moment. And what we have ended up with here, as I told everyone a week ago, they are in this very spot. Do not retaliate, and you will be rewarded.
Earlier on Wednesday, House Republicans deployed a rare procedural maneuver to block a Democratic measure that sought to force a vote on repealing Trump's tariffs by challenging his national emergency powers. We'll have the latest on Trump's tariffs after headlines with the Nobel Prize-winning economist Joe Stiglitz and the Northwestern economist Nancy Chen. The Palestinian Health Ministry says the death toll from an Israeli missile attack Wednesday on Gaza City's Shujaiya neighborhood has killed at least 35 people, with the death toll expected to rise. At least 55 people are wounded and as many as 80 others still trapped under the rubble. Victims, including children, some of them torn to pieces as multiple missiles struck a residential block where Israel later claimed a senior Hamas fighter was staying without naming them or providing evidence. The killings came as Haaretz reported Israel's army is preparing to incorporate the southern city of Rafah and surrounding neighborhoods into a buffer zone along Gaza's border. Rafah comprises about 17% of Gaza's territory. Before October 2023, it was home to some 200,000 Palestinians. It's now largely deserted after Israel in late March once again ordered the mass expulsion of the residents of Rafah. Nearly 40 days after Israel shattered the ceasefire and reimposed a near-total blockade on aid shipments, prices for food, fuel, medicine, and other essential goods are skyrocketing in Gaza. The UN says 60,000 children are at risk of malnutrition, with people forced to forage for food as community kitchens run out of food.
I swear to God, if
Gaza's border. Rafah comprises about 17% of Gaza's territory. Before October 2023, it was home to some 200,000 Palestinians. It's now largely deserted after Israel in late March once again ordered the mass expulsion of the residents of Rafah. Nearly 40 days after Israel shattered the ceasefire and reimposed a near-total blockade on aid shipments, prices for food, fuel, medicine, and other essential goods are skyrocketing in Gaza. The UN says 60,000 children are at risk of malnutrition, with people forced to forage for food as community kitchens run out of food.
I swear to God, if we don't die from airstrikes, we will die of hunger. We are not safe. The whole world, listen to us. We are really not safe.
200,000 Palestinians. It's now largely deserted after Israel in late March once again ordered the mass expulsion of the residents of Rafah. Nearly 40 days after Israel shattered the ceasefire and reimposed a near-total blockade on aid shipments, prices for food, fuel, medicine, and other essential goods are skyrocketing in Gaza. The UN says 60,000 children are at risk of malnutrition, with people forced to forage for food as community kitchens run out of food.
I swear to God, if we don't die from airstrikes, we will die of hunger. We are not safe. The whole world, listen to us. We are really not safe. We move from one soup kitchen to another with danger. I swear to God, they are striking everywhere. If I don't die in these strikes, I will die of hunger with my children. What shall we do? Where shall we go? Look at us. Find us a solution. We've been in this torture for a year and a half. We are tired.
French President Emmanuel Macron said in an interview this week that France might soon formally recognize a Palestinian state, with a decision expected in June. Meanwhile, the United States Senate Wednesday confirmed former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee as U.S. ambassador to Israel. Huckabee is a far-right Christian Zionist who's openly advocated for Israel's annexation of Palestinian lands and has said, quote, "There's really no such thing as a Palestinian," unquote. Yemen's Houthis say U.S. airstrikes overnight killed 3 people in the rebel-held Yemeni capital, Sana'a. The strikes follow a U.S. attack Tuesday on the port city of Hodeidah that reportedly killed 13 people and injured 15 others. Houthi officials said most of the dead were women and children. The U.S. has been carrying out near-daily strikes on Yemen's Iran-backed Houthis since March 15th. Meanwhile, the Trump administration has levied new sanctions against Iran, targeting its uranium enrichment program. The ratcheted-up sanctions come ahead of negotiations over Iran's nuclear program scheduled to take place in Oman on Saturday. This week, President Trump threatened that if the talks don't go well, quote, Iran is going to be in great danger. We'll have more on Iran later in the broadcast. The Trump administration says it's reversed cuts in emergency food aid to several nations after the World Food Program blasted the cuts as a death sentence for millions of people facing extreme hunger and starvation. USAID Acting Deputy Administrator Jeremy Lewin, a member of Elon Musk's Doge team, reportedly ordered staff to resume assistance to the World Food Program in Lebanon, Syria, Somalia, Jordan, Iraq, and Ecuador. But those countries do not include Afghanistan and Yemen, 2 countries with dire humanitarian situations that have been ravaged by U.S. intervention. In related news, the nonprofit Save the Children says 8 people in South Sudan, including 5 children, died last month as they were forced to walk for 3 hours to seek medical care for cholera after U.S. aid cuts shuttered local health services. South Sudan's grappling with a worsening political crisis, which has stoked fears of a renewed civil war. Federal judges in Texas and New York have temporarily blocked the removal of U.S. residents under the Alien Enemies Act, an 18th century wartime law invoked by President Trump to fast-track the expulsion of immigrants he's accused of being gang members. Both judges said any targets for removal must be able to have their cases heard in court. Trump expelled 238 people from the U.S. without due process in March, the vast majority from Venezuela. They've effectively disappeared into El Salvador's notorious megaprison, Secat. Despite the Trump administration's claims it's targeting violent criminals, data shows 90% of those removed in last month's flight had no criminal record. In Venezuela, families of the removed individuals rallied outside a UN office in Caracas to call for the release of their loved ones.
I want to ask with my heart and my hands for them to give us back our children. We Venezuelans are very united. Our priority is our family. If we are missing one, we are missing everything. That is the only thing we need. Please give us back our children.
The Trump administration Wednesday said it's looking into a possible legal pathway to transfer U.S. citizens to El Salvador's notorious Secat prison. In other immigration news, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services says it started screening social media activity of immigrants for evidence of so-called anti-Semitic activity that could be used to deny benefits, including permanent residency status. Jewish groups spoke out against the new policy. The group Bend the Arc, Jewish Action, says it's, quote, using Jews as an excuse to move a cruel anti-immigrant authoritarian agenda, unquote. The pro-Israel group J Street said, quote, the fight against anti-Semitism won't be advanced by attacks on 250-year-old cherished American rights like free speech, unquote. Germany's incoming Chancellor Friedrich Merz announced on Wednesday his center-right Christian Democratic Union made a deal to form a governing coalition with the center-left Social Democrats. The deal shuts out the extreme-right party Alternative for Germany, which had come in second place in February elections. He said Germany would boost its military spending and vowed to enact more hardline immigration policies.
As for migration, we will pursue a new approach. We will better organize and steer, and we will all but end illegal migration. There will be border checks and rejections of asylum requests. We will start a deportation program.
Doctors Without Borders is calling for immediate action after identifying cases of malnourished children in an asylum seeker camp on the Greek island of Samos. The group said 6 children from Syria and Afghanistan between the ages of 6 months and 6 years have been diagnosed with acute malnutrition and required urgent care. A quarter of the camp's residents are children. Mexico's demanding the United States respect its national sovereignty after NBC News reported President Trump is considering drone strikes on Mexican drug cartels. President Claudia Sheinbaum spoke Tuesday.
We reject any of these actions, and we also do not believe they will occur, because there is a lot of dialogue on security issues and many other topics. So no, not in Mexico.
House Speaker Mike Johnson delayed a vote Wednesday on a Trump and Senate-approved budget framework after he failed to gain sufficient support from his Republican caucus. House Republicans want to enact $2 trillion in spending cuts to offset tax cuts for the very wealthiest. Democrats oppose the budget. This is Massachusetts Congressmember Jim McGovern.
It is a budget that will hurt working families. It is a budget that will especially hurt families who are struggling in poverty. Republicans have succeeded in putting together a Marie Antoinette budget, helping the richest of the rich while hurting the poorest of the poor. Let them eat cake. That is the Republican motto. And I've never seen such cruelty contained in a budget in all my years here.
President Trump has instructed the Justice Department to stop the enforcement of state climate laws. Trump's sweeping executive order seeks to gut California's cap-and-trade program to limit carbon emissions, as well as climate superfund laws like New York and Vermont's requirement that major fossil fuel companies help cover the costs of extreme weather events. In a statement, the climate action group, the Sunrise Movement, said, quote, "This is corruption at its most blatant. Last spring, Trump told oil and gas billionaires that if they gave his campaign $1 billion, he would do their bidding. The money flowed, and now they're cashing in," they said. Death toll from an Israeli missile attack Wednesday on Gaza City's Shujaiya neighborhood has killed at least 35 people, with the death toll expected to rise. At least 55 people are wounded, and as many as 80 others still trapped under the rubble. Victims, including children, some of them torn to pieces as multiple missiles struck a residential block where Israel later claimed a senior Hamas fighter was staying without naming them or providing evidence. The killings came as Haaretz reported Israel's army is preparing to incorporate the southern city of Rafah and surrounding neighborhoods into a buffer zone along Gaza's border. Rafah comprises about 17% of Gaza's territory. Before October 2023, it was home to some 200,000 Palestinians. It's now largely deserted after Israel in late March once again ordered the mass expulsion of the residents of Rafah. Nearly 40 days after Israel shattered the ceasefire and reimposed a near-total blockade on aid shipments, prices for food, fuel, medicine, and other essential goods are skyrocketing in Gaza. The UN says 60,000 children are at risk of malnutrition, with people forced to forage for food as community kitchens run out of food.